Other films promise you the moon. This one delivers. We are the Spy-Fi guys, and this is Moonraker. Hello and welcome back to the Spy-Fi guys, where we cover spy facts, spy fiction, and everything in between. I'm Zach.
And I'm Christian.
And a happy James Bond Day to you, Christian.
Yes, happy Global James Bond Day, October 5th. This is 1962, so 62 years of
And
James
why
Bond.
was that date selected?
So October 5th is the day that Dr. No came out in 1962.
I see. So in the past, we've done fun drafting games for our Global James Bond Day. But today we are covering a particularly interesting James Bond movie with a particularly interesting guest.
Yeah, so we have my best friend Khan, who is a NASA engineer. And we figured of all the movies we could bring him on, we were going to torture him with something that's actually super scientifically inaccurate, Moonraker.
I'm sure we could find worse, but welcome on board, Khan.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Like I said, Khan, actually works for NASA, so he's going to correct all the things that are wrong in this movie. And I'm curious on your take, because as I've talked about on the podcast before, I've been to space camp, but I wanted to be an astronaut as a kid. One of my guides while I was watching this movie is this book right here. It's called the Space Shuttle Operations Manual.
Wow.
It has all of the checklists and everything that you would go through. It's very similar to like the binders we had at space camp. So I was like, all right. And space, at least at that point when I went, space camp was all shuttle based. So a lot of this stuff seemed familiar to me. So I was like, I went through it. I was like, what are they saying? Are they saying real things or are they saying made up things? What's going on?
I would say that they did a pretty good job at trying to be realistic. I mean, there are obviously a lot of things that are very sci-fi in there and, things that are meant for kind of the entertainment value of it. But actually, I saw that one of the consultants for the movie was Rockwell International, which built the space shuttle. So I was actually really surprised at some of the accuracies that they actually got in there.
So this came out in 1979, and the first shuttle launch was, 81? Is that right? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is actually, before a space shuttle had actually launched.
That is interesting, but they existed, presumably.
Yes.
I mean, they existed, but the public knew about them, but they weren't an operating thing now that they could, that people could go out and say, oh, that's not right, because the shuttle is actually like this.
So one of the things that I felt was very smart of the movie is they capitalized on all the excitement of the shuttle at that time. So just before the release of Moonraker, there was also, the shuttle Enterprise that was actually released, and that was a glider, right? But it was, it did a lot of tests out in the the desert in California. Of course, it was named after Star Trek as well. So it was named by Star Trek fans.
A fan write-in campaign. I think they were originally going to call it like the Constitution.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was awesome that they saw what was upcoming, and they were really smart to capitalize on all the excitement at that time.
Yeah. All right. So Zach, you had seen this before, right?
Christian, I feel like we should have an official segment of the podcast. That's what do you remember, if anything, of this movie? So yes, I have seen it before. Longtime listeners may remember that I got my James Bond education watching the 007 Days of Christmas on Spike TV.
Yes.
Back in the day. And it occurs to me now that they were probably edited for TV in some way or shape or form.
Probably just like the Dalton ones.
I don't think I even saw those. I mean, for time, if nothing else.
Right.
So the point is, I did see it. The only part that I really remembered was, of course, the part where they're in space.
Yes.
Though things did come back to me as I watched the movie.
Cool. Okay. And Khan, had you actually seen this before?
Yes, I watched it probably when I was in middle school. And funny enough, I had confused in my mind the location of where they were in space, right? So I thought that just based on the title, it was on the moon, and somehow in my mind I had the idea of like the you only live twice type lair on the moon as well, and
So
somehow I built that false memory in my head.
Part of that, you also maybe mixing it in with Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me, where they do have a volcano lair, and also they go to the moon.
Yeah, that's probably all the things that happened in between when I watched it in middle school, and probably all jumbled in my mind.
Yeah. Well, now that we've got the background, shall we get into our plot synopses?
Yeah, so as always, we have our poetry plot synopses. Credit to the Delta Flyers for coming up with this idea. So here is the haiku that I wrote for Moonraker. Pigeon double take. Don't make them like they used to. Too old for this shit.
All right.
I feel like that pretty much covers the movie, personally.
And is it more? You think he's too old? Interesting.
Let's just say that high definition TV doesn't do him any favors.
Fair enough. All right. Well, it doesn't do anyone any favors.
No, wait, dude. The Bond girls still look great.
Okay. What's our limerick?
Yes, and then here's our limerick. Drax has a pretty sweet place, and he plays the piano with grace. He's got secrets and lies, but the fans rolled their eyes when James Bond went into space. I say this because I feel like this movie is considered like a joke now. The idea of James Bond in space is ridiculous, but I seem to remember at the time it was pretty well received.
It was, and I mean, let's talk about the elephant in the room here. Okay, so 1979. What came out 2 years before that swept the nation and the world?
That would be Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
That was. What year does Star Trek Motion Picture come out?
I think a couple of years before Star Wars. It wasn't a big difference.
It was after. It was like 78, actually, now that I think about it.
There you go.
So, no, it was obviously Star Wars. Definitely chasing that Star Wars money. And, to a degree, actually, Star Trek Motion Picture came out in 79 as well. But yeah, so they're chasing that Star Wars money, and they succeeded because they got, this was, I don't remember if it's with or without inflation, one of the most popular, or highest grossing Bond films until, like, I think GoldenEye came out or something like that. Just to prove the point of that they weren't planning this until Star Wars came out. If you watch the previous movie, The Spy Who Loved Me, at the end of the credits where it usually says, James Bond will return in, I think they had For Your Eyes Only instead of Moonraker there.
They do move that around sometimes.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Let's have our actual plot synopsis from IMDb, Zach.
Yes, and then here's our actual plot synopsis. Very briefly. James Bond investigates the mid-air theft of a space shuttle and discovers a plot to commit global genocide. Oh my goodness.
I liked your poetry synopsis better.
Thank you. I did too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now we jump into our plot recap.
Yeah, so we start with a shuttle orbiter. So I know we're going to say shuttle all the time to refer to just this part right here. That's the orbiter. And yes, this is a Moonraker toy. I do have one of these.
Which is just a space shuttle with Moonraker on it, presumably.
Well, no, it's actually, there's got the actual designs, like,
there you go.
Logo of it. It actually has a Drax logo. SLS, Space Launch System, is the entire thing. It's not just the orbiter. It's the orbiter, the external tank, and the 2 solid rocket boosters. We're going to refer to the whole thing, to just the orbiter, as the shuttle a lot.
This opening scene has the great James Bond tradition of a bunch of random people getting killed by the bad guys.
Yeah. The orbiter, a Moonraker orbiter, on top of a 747, where they're transporting it to England. Now, this is actually how they transported the shuttle.
So, do you guys remember, those of you living in the DC area, do you remember when they flew the shuttle over the DC area on its way to the Dulles Air and Space Museum?
Yeah, that was, I believe it's Discovery, right? That came...
Yep. I ran out of the work where I was working, and I watched it fly over.
I missed it. I didn't have a chance to see it, but that would have been real cool. But we used to have Enterprise over at Udvar-Hazy, but now we've got Discovery.
Flew over the DC area, and it actually did a loop around NASA Goddard Space Flight Center.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
practically half the workforce at NASA Goddard was just out on the lawn watching it.
That's awesome. We see two people sneak into the orbiter, and they start the engines, except... Khan, do you want to take this one? Why can't they start the engines?
Ooh, I want to know why not. They can't just turn the ignition on?
They might not necessarily be able to start the engines without any fuel. So the shuttle itself, well, it's not flown with on the carrier with any fuel, but also when you hear, Christian, you were talking about the STS a little bit earlier. So that big giant orange tank in front, and then the two solid rocket boosters, those are actually the fuel to get it up into space, right? And the big orange tank actually has both hydrogen and oxygen in it. So, unfortunately, you can't start up the engines or fly it without that big orange tank.
So, not at all?
Well,
nope, not at all.
Yes and no. So, and this is not going to work for all. This is an audio medium, but I'm doing this with my model here. So you have the big engines on the back called the SSMEs, or Space Shuttle Main Engines.
Mm-hmm.
Those run on the fuel from the external tank. You do have on the side right here next to them more so basically like more, they're called the OMS, orbital maneuvering system, which are basically just for use in space, in outer space itself. So that they're used for your deceleration to come back from orbit, or you're making minute adjustments. So that's when the space shuttle is actually in space. That's how they maneuver it. In a real world, there would be zero fuel on it, but let's just say that there was fuel in it. They could use the ohms, but the ohms really wouldn't work in atmosphere.
So you can't just fly it around like a normal airplane? It never even really occurred to me that you could do that.
Nope. No, you cannot. Also, I'm like, as soon as they started pressing buttons, I'm like, that's not, even if you did have fuel, that's not what those buttons, those switches are. In a space shuttle, all your panels it's got a letter and a number. So your F1, 2, 3, etc. That's in your front. You've got your overhead or O panel, and then your C or central, and then you've got the right and left panel art. And I remember, because I was the pilot during space camp, your panel R2 is a lot of the buttons that you're going to use from when you're when you're doing main engine start. You would not be pressing the overhead buttons like they are.
Yes, but the overhead buttons are the coolest buttons. You forgot about
You really can't see when they're reaching around to your side at panel R2, which I had memorized by the end of it, because I was like, all right, I knew this, and that, yeah. I know we usually hold our spy fact versus spy fiction for the end, but this one is like, I gotta get this out now.
This is awesome because I feel like I'm talking with the space shuttle pilot as well. I can comment from the engineering side, but you got the piloting side.
Yeah. In this world where there's somehow fuel and also internal fuel in an orbiter, they launch the shuttle and fly it off, and the 747 carrying it explodes.
It's a great start.
Yeah.
So I actually found that really funny when it explodes, because it immediately explodes and then it just like starts going down immediately, and just based on its flight velocity, it probably wouldn't actually do that.
Like, you mean like it drops directly down? Like
it drops directly down. Yeah, and not just that, but also you start up those engines and you might melt a couple of things, but it wouldn't just go kaboom. Especially because that's not where the plane stores its fuel.
This also reminds me of the best part of the mostly forgotten movie Superman Returns. When he saves the space shuttle being carried on top of the plane.
That's right. Yeah, which that one was designed to launch from a plane, if I recall, and there was a fictional shuttle. So yeah, that one makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we get a quick scene of M and Moneypenny. M is looking for Bond, and apparently he's on his last leg, literally, because he is feeling up a girl.
That made me laugh out loud. I'm not gonna lie.
Turns out the people, the flight that he's on, not actually friendlies. They're bad guys who want to kill him. He ends up jumping out of a plane without a parachute.
This was great.
Yeah.
This stunt looked really good. I think they filmed it by actually having stunt guys fly out of the plane.
Yeah.
Did they have? I assume Roger Moore didn't do it.
No, it was a bunch of stunt guys. Actually, for this one, they actually designed a brand new type of parachute that could be hidden underneath a jacket. And so that's how they were able to get away with it. So actually, when you watch it, the actor for Bond, when he's putting on the other parachute. He actually has 3 parachutes on him there because he's got the hidden one under his blazer for emergencies, and then he's got his reserve and his main chute in his pack.
I see.
Yeah.
So this seems great. Good fighting. Looks awesome. Looks totally real. But then it bugged me when Jaws showed up. Because I was like, where did Jaws come from? Was he on the plane the whole time?
Actually, yes.
Oh,
if you go back to it, you can watch it. You can see he's in the co-pilot seat.
Oh.
I'm surprised he didn't just show up then.
Yeah.
There was another thing that I found really funny about this, which was that they shot up the instrumentation panel on the plane, and then the plane started going down. I don't think that's actually how it works either.
No.
Well, that's a science fiction
staple. Not unless, all right, when they shoot the pilot, they kill him. He like leans forward on the yoke. Then they would actually go down.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to start a whole argument here.
Okay.
So I'm just going to say it. Don't argue with me. I've never been a fan of Roger Moore as James Bond.
That's
Christian, I know you disagree.
Well, so, I mean, I have my soft spots for all the Bonds. He's not my favorite, but I enjoy him.
This movie is not the peak silly of James Bond, but it's definitely getting there. And every time something cool happens, they immediately undermine it with something silly. So in this case, we have this totally awesome skydiving fight scene, but then it ends with Jaws landing on a circus with circus music.
You're forgetting when he's flapping his wings when his parachute doesn't open.
That is also stupid. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah, no,
thank you.
Hey, don't get me wrong. I like this is also not I'm just put it out there. This is actually not my favorite Bond film. But
I don't think it's anyone's favorite Bond film. I'm just saying this is so irritating.
There are people out there who love this, like legitimately really love this film.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, the Bond movies take all types. So, but it's one I still enjoy. But there's a lot of silliness, and sometimes you're just in a mood for that kind of silliness. Jaws' parachute doesn't work, so he survives by landing in a circus tent.
So then we have the opening credits. For once, it makes sense that naked women are floating around. Get it? Because they're in space.
Yeah, there's I was not impressed with this title sequence. It was kind of dull to me.
Well, the song, I did not care for the song.
Well, I have a soft spot for this song, and so I don't know if I ever told you this, Zach, that some of my lullabies for my daughter are like all of the the ballady James Bond themes, like Nobody Does It Better. Actually, there's a whole run, like Nobody Does It Better, Moonraker, For Your Eyes Only, All Time High. That's about where it ends, yeah. So I've sung this one a lot to my daughter, so I'm like, I have a soft spot for her. And it's Shirley Bassey back for her 3rd Bond theme, so you can't really go wrong with Shirley Bassey.
I see. Con, did you have any thoughts on the opening?
I love the fact that it was actually these kind of cheesy, but actually kind of retro cool 70s graphics that, that they had for it. And you're absolutely right. So I think that that swimming scene is a really good preview of how they attempt to show weightlessness a little bit later in the movie when they're in space.
Definitely of that 70s design, but I was just like, I kind of wanted more. Like, you do one in space, do something more. Yeah.
Fair enough.
All right, so we next go where Bond arrives in M's office. He meets Q and the Minister of Defense.
He only gets the one Q gadget.
Yeah. Well,
this is interesting.
Yes and no. Well, he gets the one, but we see others featured later on.
Yes.
Yeah. I was actually surprised that you had to reload the gadget. I mean, I don't feel like that's a fail by Cold War, standards.
Yeah.
Definitely a design issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right? He was fighting multiple people.
Yeah, but we find out the Moonraker was being flown from America on the back of that 747 on a loan to England. And it crashed somewhere in the Yukon, but when they analyzed the crash, there was no wreckage of the orbiter. So it must have been some sort of mid-air hijack. We find out that the Moonraker shuttle was built in California by Drax Industries.
So I do appreciate that this is kind of like Dr. No, where it's a detective story.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's transparently obvious who the bad guy is right away. But that's true with all James Bond movies.
Yeah. So yeah, like we said, he gets a new gadget. It's a wrist dart gun, we have Bond landing in California. And what I like here is they actually did land in LAX, because you can see the Encounter building in the distance.
Hollywood.
Yeah. And then he is taken in a helicopter to the Drax estate, where we are definitely no longer in California.
Well, it's I love that it's a little slice of France just in the middle. I mean, you could tell that it's actually, within probably the LA Valley, right? But it's just this little slice of France in the middle of there.
I mean, talk about that nice house that Drax has.
Yes.
I gotta say, when James Bond first meets Drax, something they don't do in movies anymore, let alone James Bond movies, is there's just babes everywhere in this movie.
Yeah.
That's why I had in my haiku, they don't make them like that anymore.
Okay. I was wondering about that.
Well, there's a bunch of reasons, but that's the main one that jumped out to me.
I love that when the helicopter was landing, though, and they showed all the people on his estate that were exercising, and it was only the women that were in skimpy outfits. The men just had like normal exercise outfits, but the women were the ones with the skimpy outfits.
Yep. See what I mean? Thank you. Thank you.
And so he's flown by Corinne, who's a pilot. And we find out that apparently Drax transported every stone from France. So there's an excuse for why this all just looks very French. So Bond meets Drax, who's playing a piano. Does he look familiar, Zach?
Does he look familiar? No, he looks like a very generic James Bond villain.
Well, he's in one of your favorite movies.
Oh, yeah?
Munich.
I don't know if that's one of my favorite movies.
Well, one of your favorite movies we've covered.
That is true. Which one was he?
He is the head of the French family that they do business with.
Yeah, and you mentioned it at the time.
I mentioned at the time that the other actor, Matthew Almeric or something to that effect, who's the main guy he deals with, later would play a Bond villain opposite Daniel Craig, who was also in Munich.
That's right.
Anyways, but yes, Michael Lonsdale. We find out that the shuttle is not just made in California, but by other subsidiaries of Drax's all around the world. He has also got some well-trained dogs that we notice.
That's right. And we meet his manservant, who's like a discount odd job. He's like odd job but worse.
Yeah. Chang, yes. Chang.
Yes, that's right. And Dr. Goodhead, which is hilarious.
Yes. So
again, they don't make him like they used to.
So Dr. Goodhead is a fully trained NASA astronaut. I like how when they bring up NASA, she has to specifically call out the Space Administration, as if the whole world didn't know what NASA was, about, 10 years before that when we landed on the moon.
Do you guys like the part where James Bond is like, a woman doctor? That's crazy.
He's like, a woman?
She gives it right back to him, though.
Yeah,
I like that.
You mentioned Chang a little bit earlier, and I love the fact that Chang is like a random agglomeration of Asian stereotypes all put into one. So, like, he's supposed to be Japanese. He's wearing a Japanese kimono, but like it's not really tied very well. His name is more Chinese. He's also serving tea like kind of the European way, which I actually found really funny as well.
That is pretty funny. Yeah.
That is true. And then later he uses the Japanese, like, not a katana, but like a training one.
Yeah.
Like the kendo sword. Yeah.
The kendo.
That's it. Thank
what
you.
It's called? Shinai. Yeah, that's right.
Which I was thinking is the absolute worst way to actually go attack someone if you're trying to assassinate them. Yep.
Oh, yeah. But we will get there.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. So they go to, I guess, what must be their version of the vehicle assembly building, because that's where they have their shuttles. Except the VAB can fit like one shuttle. This one somehow has like 6.
It looked awesome.
How huge? And this is like a point of reference that they always say on the tours at Kennedy Space Center that, VAB is so huge that the American flag painted on the side of it, stripes are wide enough that you can drive like a tour bus on them.
Nice.
Yeah.
I also like that Drax mentions, he's like, he gave the UK an extra shuttle. He just had an extra shuttle lying around, which is pretty funny. Guys, Con, you can help me back me up on this. There's a part where Dr. Goodhead says to Bond, he like asks what the Moonraker is, and she says, "Oh, it's an orbital space shuttle. It can orbit the Earth and re-enter on its own." And I was like, but that's just a normal space shuttle that she's describing.
Except,
Why is the Moonraker special?
But remember, this is before the space shuttle actually launched. That's
why it confused me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, Moonraker is the space shuttle.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually out of all of the space hardware that they feature in this movie, the space shuttle is actually the most accurate. Like I was looking at it and I was like, wow, they did a really good job with this.
Yeah. Most of the panels are there. There's definitely some liberties taken in some places, and we'll get to those. But looking at my little model here, the one thing that is off is the windows are not quite, like the windows in the front are not quite right. Yeah. There's usually just 2 big windows, if I recall, and this one has them broken up more like the Concords, like front. Yeah. So we get a scene in a centrifuge because, of course, every movie where you have someone who's going to train to be an astronaut has to be in a centrifuge.
Yeah, and they often almost die in it.
Yeah.
I was definitely so I had 2 questions about this particular scene. One was, why would they just put him directly into a centrifuge on the tour?
Right.
Yeah, and why would he agree to it as well, right? And then the other one was, I was definitely getting, especially when it started spinning up really quickly, I was getting Total Recall vibes with, the kind of the being on the surface of Mars.
Oh, yeah. No, I actually liked this part. I thought it was pretty intense, and I was like, well, how is James Bond going to get out of this one? And I forgot about the Q gadget. I didn't think you would use it this early. I thought Dr. Goodhead was going to come back and save him.
Yeah, I did like that they have a chicken switch that, if it gets too intense, he could press that button. But of course, Chang disabled it. And I also like, they give the specifications of, all right, 3 Gs is about takeoff pressure, but you can go up to 20 Gs, which would be fatal. But why would you make it able to do that? Like, Khan, I know at Goddard there is a centrifuge, but that was not. There's no. It wasn't set up for like manned. First, people would actually use it. It's for testing your actual instrumentation.
For any robotic spacecraft, it's a lot. Actually, it can withstand a lot greater launch loads because they don't have the soft squishy parts that that humans have. So that makes sense to actually go up to something like 20 Gs. But to answer your question, Christian, it's just to knock off the astronauts that you don't want in your program, right?
But yeah, so he uses the dart gun to stop the whole thing, and then what I like here is he's definitely frazzled, and he's so frazzled he doesn't even have a quip after he gets out of there.
Yeah, he looks pretty frazzled too.
On my list is to do a centrifuge. I don't. They don't have one at Space Camp, or at least not the one that I saw. What they did have is basically one of those carnival rides where it's like shaped like a circle and it just spins around really fast, and you sort of pin to the back of it. You can slide up and down, and that that gives you some amount of G-force, but it's not as much as a centrifuge. And I think that would be an experience. So Bond goes to Corinne's room to seduce some information out of her.
Okay, and why is this room so nice? She said that she's just a pilot. It's like a 5-star hotel suite.
Because it's a fancy French mansion, so every room is this nice.
I choose to believe that she's Drax's personal,
I believe she is also like his secretary because she knows the room.
Wink, wink, wink.
Maybe, who knows? I don't know. See, the thing is, though, the Drax never seems to show any interest like that.
What about the babes that hang around with them all the time? Is that just for status?
Probably for status, and also because probably they're also part of the, eugenics program.
Yeah, there you go.
If we're going to call a spade, that's what it is.
Yeah. But yeah, so we get some good spying in this part. He has a safe cracker gadget.
I like
that. So I liked it too.
What it reminded me of, and I think both of you have done it with me. Operation Spy back at the old Spy Museum location. There was a segment where you have to crack a safe. Now I always did that, and I was able to do it because the safe, unlike a real safe, was clear, so you could actually see, the wheels of the combination lock that you're trying to uncode. So it's like, all right, it's a way for Bond to get that without on a real safe. Was having his little X-ray machine.
There you go. And then we get the Minax camera with the 007 on it.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
I really love that. I was also funny enough, I put so in my notes, I was actually really upset that he took the documents out of the safe, and then he put it back in there without taking note of the order of them, before. And I was like, no, what are you doing? You're supposed to be a good spy.
Yeah.
How do you know he did it? Maybe he just did it too quickly. You couldn't even see it.
That's a good point.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, but what he sees in those plans is something about Venetian glass, and he sees a particular brand. I think it's Venini glass or something like that. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about Corinne a little bit here, where she says, my mother gave me a list of things not to do on a first date. And then, like, when they start kissing, he says, what about that list of yours? I never learned how to read. I was like, oh, God.
Christian, stop stealing all of my favorite lines.
Oh, that was on mine as well.
Well, I linked it because it's so bad.
It's so bad, though. Oh, like, of the thing, like, of the reason. Oh, just wow.
While I was taking notes while I was watching this, what I wrote for this scene was not #MeTooFriendly.
Oh no!
Well, I mean, come on, it's James Bond.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that, like, he shows up and then she just starts divulging secrets, and
right?
Like,
she is. Yeah.
Unless Drax was in on it the whole time.
Doubtful. Especially given what happens to her.
So actually, I don't want to be difficult.
Okay.
But did they ever explain why Drax stole the Moonraker in the first place?
And we'll get to that later. And it is in my notes.
Okay, thank you.
So there is a reason.
I missed it, I think.
All right. Because I was wondering that too. And we got to say, okay, they did explain why. Because, it'll make sense. Next, we get a hunting scene where Drax is hunting, I believe is it geese or
the most dangerous game?
Bond comes over to him because he's leaving. I like how the horn that plays also Sprach Zarathustra, however you pronounce that, the theme from 2001: A Space Odyssey.
That's right. And then again, they try to kill James Bond in the most inefficient, strangest way to do it,
like a hunting accident.
Sure.
That's their cover for this. So he got Dick Cheney'd.
Yeah, I actually thought Dick Cheney as well when watching this part.
I like this though, where Drax convinces him to have a go at shooting, and he tracks some. I think it's geese. I'm not actually sure. Tracks it across where the sniper is. Shoots, and Drax is like, "You missed, did I?" And the guy falls out of the tree.
Yeah, it's an old trope, but I still like it. I do like how they look, and then Drax knows, and Bond knows, and Drax knows that Bond knows, and Bond knows that Drax knows that Bond knows.
Yeah,
but nobody does anything.
And no one says it out loud.
Yeah.
So I was wondering why Bond pretty much goes there, and Drax is trying to convince that he's not complicit in all of this, and yet he does all of these things to make it seem like he's very complicit in trying to kill Bond.
Yeah, I think he's just because he knows his plan is going ahead real soon. So it doesn't matter if he just kills Bond, because there will be no consequence, because there will be no one to bring consequences to him.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Classic bad guy overconfidence, in other words.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But on a more terrifying note, after Bond leaves, Corinne is chased by those well-trained dogs, and it's kind of gruesome. Like, you don't see anything. The camera pans up before you actually see anything, but it's like, wow, that's a terrible way to go.
Yeah, and then the dogs never come back. I thought James Bond was going to fight them later, but I guess not.
Yeah.
I was impressed at how quickly she ran in high heels, though. I was thinking that was the most impressive run since I saw that in Jurassic World.
And then, do you guys like when she runs right past the golf cart?
Oh, I missed that.
I'm not going to judge, though, because she was probably scared. And wasn't thinking. It is sad, though. This movie isn't quite the James Bond girl formula, but it's close.
Well.
In the sense that one dies and one comes along later.
But there's a surprise twist to that formula, and we'll get to that when we do. So Bond arrives in Venice, and he goes to the shop where the Venetian glass is from, sees the glass blowers making hexagonal tubes.
There's this girl at the desk who it looks like she's 15.
Okay.
Did you guys notice this? Because James Bond's like, hey, what's up?
he says, "Can I offer you anything?" He's like, what does he say? Something to the effect of, "I'm tempted to say yes immediately."
Yeah, it's like, ew, stop. But yeah, Goodhead is there. We got
Yeah.
some nice sets. There's some. It's like a video game where the music starts. You know, there's going to be a fight. There's like danger music.
Yeah, I also like where we get basically the room of breakable objects, which
That's
we
right.
see. I was like looking around, I was like, these look like definitely some of the same locations that are in the last scene in Casino Royale where they're running around Venice.
Yeah, they just love going back to Venice in these action
I mean,
movies.
I've never been to Venice. I want to go, so someday soon, hopefully, I will get to go there and run around these random columns.
There you go.
Bond asks Goodhead what she's doing there. She's addressing a seminar of the European Space Commission. Is that a thing?
Not a thing.
I think so. There's the ESA, which is the
Right.
European Space Agency, but that's not a commission.
This actually motivated me to look up what the history of ESA was. And the European Space Agency was established in 1975, so I don't know why they wouldn't have just said that, but what existed before was actually the European Launcher Development Organization and the European Space Research Organization. So they could have used any of those acronyms.
No, but they just decided to make something else. So, okay. But yeah, so he says, all right, well, let's have a drink after your address. And she says, oh, I can't think of a reason to say no. I like this, though. This is the start of a fun set of action scenes. Bond gets on a gondola, and we get a funeral gondola, which I didn't know was a thing, and I'm actually not sure if it is actually a thing. I'm kind of curious.
I can see it.
But it approaches. But I like how, as it gets close, the casket opens, and then that little contraption that brings out all the knives to him turns around.
Again, a very elaborate and unnecessarily complicated way to kill James Bond.
I'm going to quote Dr. Evil here, Zach, where it's like, where he says, why don't you just get a gun and shoot him? And Dr. Evil says, you just don't get it, do you, Scott?
Yeah, this is not how it works. So then he gets chased. The bad guy's shooting him using an MP40 machine gun, just right out of World War II. I don't know why they're using it now.
Yeah.
I
like how he kills the guy in the casket, and the casket is used for its proper purpose now.
That's right.
So the guy is kind of made up to look like he's dead anyway. So
yeah,
the fact that he falls into the casket, I thought was just perfect.
Also, I enjoy that the gondola has a turbo mode, so he can just go super fast in the gondola.
I mean, see what I mean? How it's right on the edge of stupid, and then it finally goes over the top.
Oh, you thought this turbo mode was stupid?
No, I thought it was almost stupid.
Okay.
I thought it was right out there.
Then it goes
close.
over the top. Well, yeah. I like the sight gags we have here of, crashing into the kissing couple, and they're so distracted they don't notice that half their boat's gone.
That's right.
But yes, here's where it goes over the line, Zach, where the gondola turns into a hovercraft.
So, do you remember the pigeon square from Spies in Disguise?
Yes, that is St. Mark's Square. That's the same square.
Yeah. So this is the infamous pigeon double take that I mentioned before. I guess because you guys are laughing, you liked it.
I loved it.
I knew it was there. I was expecting it, and the music, dun, 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 and you just have him turning his head. It's definitely just a camera trick. They didn't. I would have been more impressed if they trained a pigeon to do that.
Yeah, so this was... I think scenes like this is led to the joke of James Bond as a spy, but he's also very famous. Everyone seems to know who he is, and he's always doing things to draw attention to himself. I also
like here, and I don't remember how many... Let's see, because who directed this one? This is Lewis Gilbert, maybe? There's a recurring joke in a couple of Bond movies of the drunk guy who sees something that crazy that Bond's doing, looks at his wine, and then throws
What's in
it.
This thing?
It's in this one. It's in a couple others. I don't remember which one they are, but I enjoy just that recurring bit of, all right, I keep going to all these, being on vacation, and something crazy happens. Maybe I should really stop drinking.
Do you think it's supposed to be the same guy? That's hilarious.
Well, because it's the same guy. Yeah.
That's great.
He's in at least two of them. I don't remember what the other one is. Yeah.
This is where, though, and Zach, you were saying this a little bit before, that Roger Moore is not, you don't necessarily like him as Bond, but one of the things I love about him is that he actually leans into the jokes. He realizes that he's supposed to be pretty silly. So, I mean, this is where I can't imagine another Bond movie where I could actually take a pigeon double take and think about it, kind of like, oh, it fits into this movie pretty well. But
that is a good point.
Imagine that with the Roger Moore movie.
The only one who might get close is Brosnan, but it wouldn't. It's no.
But can you imagine Sean Connery driving that gondola across St. Mark's Square?
No, well,
it feels weird, right?
I would say in the land of his tenure and to Diamonds Are Forever, it
sure.
gets kind of ridiculous. It gets real ridiculous, but
doesn't mean we have to like it though.
That night, sneaks back into the glass shop, sneaks around. We get the Close Encounters theme for the code to get into for the keypad.
That's right.
Bum, bum.
You meet some scientists. The scientists kill themselves with gas. Christian, no,
he's responsible for this.
Oh, really?
So the scientists are filling up the canisters with gas. When they leave the room, he grabs one of the canisters, which has like 6 vials in it. He pockets one of them, and then it leaves it on top of the pod that they're supposed to go into. When the scientists come, and then he hears the scientists come back, he doesn't put the vials away and hides in the glass in case, where it's safe. When the scientists move the pod, the vials break. So it's his fault that they're dead.
So
granted, they're probably in on the whole deal because they're they know what they're transporting, what they're doing. So no real tear shed, but it is his fault. It's not by accident.
Do you remember the part in Triple X where the bad guy gasses all the scientists? Was it Triple X?
Could have been. I don't actually remember.
No. All right.
So one of the other things that you mentioned a little bit earlier was that they were really trying to capitalize on the success of Star Wars, and when they walked into this room in Venice with all the fancy equipment and gas, I was just thinking, did the Empire design this room? Like, it looks so much like Imperial architecture.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll get some even more like blatant design choices a little bit later.
Well, I do appreciate that most of the movie they're not in space, and then it does feel like a pretty normal James Bond movie.
Yeah, like it is a decent, like at least up to this point, I'm having a fun time. Like, all right, he's finding out what's going on. There's been fun little bits of action, and we get one of my favorite things in this next part: James Bond sword fighting.
Right. And destroying stuff.
Yeah. Well,
destroying priceless artifacts.
So he's about to escape, but he encounters Chang in kendo gear, waving around a shinai, which, like Khan said earlier, is probably of the different types of, equipment he could have used, is the least effective. I've been hit with a shinai. It hurts. It's not going to kill you. You get hit hard with a bokken, which is the solid wooden one. That's you get in the back of the head. That could knock you out or kill you. So there's really no reason why he should be using that. And I did enjoy that. Roger Moore grabbed the glass handled sword, which is like a fencing foil or some type of fencing sword, maybe more of a rapier. And we get some good sword fighting. Like, as a former fencer, I was like, all right, he's definitely got some form. He was trained to do this.
So I know I was making fun of Roger Moore for being old, which he is, but he does do a good job with the fights.
Yeah, he does. He definitely does.
It's the macking on the ladies where it gets really unfortunate.
Fair enough. This is in the room with all of the glass artifacts. Break everything. I did enjoy the one bit where they there's the one piece that's so valuable they have an alarm just for it. If you you put your hand near it, and it breaks, and he puts just the base of it down, and that just turns off the alarm.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Please, I like here that Bond actually does something smart. He checks the vial in his pocket after the fight to make sure he's not broken it. And actually, you know what this did remind me of, Zach, with a movie we've covered recently.
Yeah, where it's have to make sure it doesn't... Oh, The Rock.
The Rock.
There we go. I see it was going to come to me.
Yeah. Anyway, so, Bond...
Of course, the fight ends with the bad guy getting thrown out the window in a very public death again.
Yep.
Well, it's almost like there's a super spy in town.
But also, while he's, looking for Chang in that attic area, he notices a bunch of boxes marked for Rio.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Goodhead is relaxing in her room. I'm just going to call her Holly because saying Goodhead all over and over again.
Come on. Come on.
Part of the fun.
Well, she's relaxing in her room after her presentation to the fictional space agency.
Yeah, and she's got a bunch of hidden weapons, we discover.
Yeah, so Bond surprises her, tells her that Chang attacked her. Bond is going through all her things and finds all the variety of spy gadgets, including poison pan, dart gun diary, flamethrower perfume.
None of which gets used later.
One of which gets used.
That's disappointing.
Just one. Well, that's like your average Q scene. You see all these things, and then like he'll give you they'll use one thing.
That's right.
Apparently, this is all standard CIA equipment, which means that Holly Goodhead works for the CIA as well as NASA. Dr. Goodhead proposes that they pool resources, and he notices a plane ticket for Rio as well as packed luggage, but she doesn't say anything.
Right.
And they sleep together.
No promises, though.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're both secret agents, so they know how this world works.
Oh.
Bond wakes up and leaves, thinking that he's one step ahead of her, but as soon as he gets out of bed, Holly opens her eyes and then leaves for the airport immediately.
That's right.
So they're, she is cliche of, all right, this Bond girl's new and different and she's Bond's equal, but this is actually one of the cases where she is kind of actually his equal.
Well, I don't know about that. Closer to it, maybe.
Oh, okay, maybe. Bond is with M and the Minister of Defense going to the glass factory where Bond found the vials.
This is great.
He has them all put on gas masks, and they enter the building, press the code, and everything is gone. There's no laboratory there. It's just Drax.
Yeah, Drax is standing there, and then they're like, oh my god, this is so embarrassing. 007, what are you doing? You're off the case.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
The Minister of Defense apologizes, and after all of the huffing and puffing of the Minister of Defense, Bond gives M the vial and tells him to have Q analyze it. M says, all right, well, you're off the case, so you should take 2 weeks leave. Any idea where you might go? Well, I've always wanted to go to Rio, sir.
There you go. So I do like the next part where Drax is on the phone. He's like, hey, my henchman died. Can I get a replacement henchman?
Yep.
And he's like, oh, wow, Jaws is available? That's great.
That's how it's always done in the villain world.
Who is supplying? Is there a villain union?
Well, I mean, I assume it's Spectre.
Yeah.
Is Spectre still around in the Roger Moore era?
No. Well,
they're gone.
Yes and no.
They became a villain supplier.
Yeah, we get it. This is the phase of the time where there's lawsuits over the rights to Spectre. The very next film is where we'll see sort of the last of Blofeld and Spectre until 2015, pretty much.
Yeah, until they reboot it. Yeah, it's like I feel like Jaws could have just shown up. They didn't really need a scene where he gets hired, but I appreciate that. Well, especially because the vast majority of the movie is through James Bond's eyes, so to speak. But this one part is not.
Yeah.
I was thinking it might set him up because he's not necessarily, he's just a henchman for hire. So it might actually set up for the part where he's more disillusioned at the end.
Right? Could be. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
But I do enjoy that we get, it's like the Wolverine gag, goes through, airport security, and of course he goes off because he's got metal teeth.
That's right. Jaws is getting sillier too, right along with his arch nemesis, James Bond.
Yeah. So Bond lands on the Concorde in Rio. Now, this exact Concorde is at the Udvar Hazy Air and Space Museum out near Dulles.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, if you look at the tail numbers, they are the same.
Wow.
Oh, like the plane, that is.
Yes, yes.
Interesting.
This Concorde.
I did like the fact that they featured Rio as one of the, the destinations for the Concorde. It was one of the first Concorde flights was actually from Paris to Rio.
Really? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Oh, nice. This is a good choice.
Yeah. As he's, going from the airport to his hotel, we see a girl taking a photo of him. He's shown to his room, which is the president's suite, and we hear someone shaking a martini shaker. This is Manuela. She works for Station VH, which I'm not sure where that's supposed to be.
Well, regardless, Bond immediately makes a move on her.
Yeah. before he does, he mentions the letters C and W, which he saw on the boxes that were going to Rio. Their import is a Drax subsidiary, but that's when he makes his move with his line. Am I stepping on anyone's line? Favorite line here?
No.
So what are you doing?
Not this time.
All right. So what are you doing for 5 hours in Rio if you don't samba? Pull on the belt.
Yikes.
You're just gift wrapped. Yep.
Right. Oh.
Well, doesn't he ask her, do you come with the suite? Which is kind of sexist, too.
Depends on who's renting it.
Yeah. 5 hours later, presumably, we are... This is Carnival, right? I was like, this is not Mardi Gras, it's Carnival. Because, of course, every time you visit Rio...
Exactly. Somehow, right? That's the only thing that's the only time that movies go to Rio is during Carnival, right?
Like if you go to Pamplona, of course you're there during the running of the bulls.
Yeah, why else would you go?
Exactly. It's just a ghost town otherwise.
Yep. Bond and Manuela sneak into the C&W warehouse. Manuela standing guard while Bond goes in. Bond finds some Drax Air Flight logos, while Manuela encounters a tall clown who, of course, is Jaws.
Yeah, this was scary.
Yeah.
And I like that she fights him, almost dies, almost survives. It's a good back and forth.
Yeah, and then when he's trying to kill her and the crowd of partiers approaches, he pretends that they're just drunkenly dancing, and then that's how he gets ferried away, or how they get away from him at the end is basically a bunch of partiers come and he gets swept up away with them. And I like how at a certain point he's fighting it and then he just decides to go with it. All right, I'm going to be dancing along.
He's not paid enough. I also like the moment of recognition between him and James Bond.
Yeah.
It's so we meet again.
Yeah.
I was surprised she didn't actually scream though when Jaws was pretty much held her captive, because it's not like she has anything to lose by screaming at that point with the partiers coming through. Right?
The only thing, I guess with the partiers, the only thing that maybe she's trying not to call attention to the fact that Bond is in the warehouse. That's the only reason I can think of it. But once the partiers are there, I presume she's just in shock or something.
There you go.
Also, what I was surprised, she doesn't die at the end of this. I thought she dies.
It would make sense because she disappears. You never see her again.
Yeah, well, she's she's a local agent. So, and usually what happens with these local female agents is, they're part of the mission and then they die.
Yeah, well, that's the formula.
Bond mourns them briefly and then moves on with the mission.
That's right. But yeah, so next we get the cable car scene.
Yes.
And this did come back to me. I was like, oh yeah, doesn't Jaws bite the cable and then they have to jump off the car? But then that didn't happen. That was wrong.
Kind of. So, so they're go up to this viewpoint in Rio. Oh, actually, I don't think I've asked it. Any of you been to Rio?
Nope.
Okay, me neither. But yeah, so they and he's watching the airport because he knows that's where Drax Air Flight flies out of. And of course, once he swings his viewing, they're not binoculars. It's like a telescope, but it's like those tourist telescopes. I don't remember what.
Yeah, that's right.
Swings it over, and there's Holly Goodhead, who's looking right at him too.
That's right.
Apparently, these planes have been taking off every 2 hours, bringing supplies somewhere. Now, they still don't trust each other, but they're going to team up, and they go into those gondola lifts. Jaws catches up to them, bites the cable.
Yes. So a couple thoughts here. First, I don't understand why if Jaws can bite his way through cables, he doesn't just bite both of them and have them fall to the ground and explode.
Yeah, I've got no good reasons for you there.
Well, it's once again the bad guys do it in an excessively complicated way. But also, Jaws' clothing. Did you guys notice his clothing in this part? So he has nice shoes, khaki pants, and a collared shirt.
Yeah.
I was like, why is he dressed like a tactical assassin? I guess that he's a spy, but he doesn't exactly blend in.
Yeah, well,
this is Jaws.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's funny that James Bond also walks around wearing khakis and a nice shirt. He dresses like me when I go to work.
Yeah.
Just all the time.
Yeah. That's part of his charm, that he's always the best dressed person.
Well, he's not the best dressed because otherwise he'd be wearing a suit. In later movies, he wears a suit all the time.
He is wearing a tuxedo.
In this scene?
Yep.
Okay. There you go. Well, that's his Indiana Jones hat and jacket.
Well, he's
like,
wearing
he has to wear it.
Presumably, he didn't go home, so that's the same tuxedo he was wearing during Carnival. But yeah, so they do have the chase. I like they get stuck and Jaws jumps from one gondola to the next. They have a fight.
So James Bond isn't carrying any weapons in this part? He doesn't even have his gun. I thought that was interesting.
Think about it. He hasn't hold his PPK the entire film.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Does he even shoot a gun? Yeah, I don't think he ever shoots a gun the whole time.
Yes, he does.
Oh, okay. I remember reading somewhere that Roger Moore was a pacifist who hated violence. Is that true?
So he didn't like guns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But he did actually study, I think, judo and karate, if I recall. Mostly to do stunts for his long-running series, The Saint.
There you go.
Yeah.
I recall in this scene that the engineer part of me was thinking, how much force would it actually take for Jaws to bite that cable? And I did like a quick calculation, and it was something like 40,000, anywhere between, depending on how thick the cable is, anywhere between like 7,000 and 40,000 pounds of force. So I'm like, wow, he has some pretty powerful jaws.
Yeah, I should have. I forgot that this was a thing, but they actually did cover this on MythBusters in one of their like James Bond specials. All right, they got some jaws, made facsimiles of the jaws' teeth, put them on a human jaw, and like put a cable between it and put like the maximum pressure that you can bite with. And, nowhere close. And they were like, it would have had to been a ridiculous amount of force to actually bite through those cables.
Mm-hmm.
I also, what I found funny was apparently I didn't know that Jaws had a stare that actually stopped cable cars as well, because there's a part where he just stares at it and suddenly the wheel stops, the flywheel stops.
Well, no, I think he was trying to communicate to the other henchman who was down on the other side, who was moving it back and forth.
Well, this part, there's also some inconsistency with Jaws' like strength. Like he can stop the cable car wheel.
Yeah.
At that one part, but then there's also a part where like Holly Goodhead like hits him, and it doesn't seem to actually does some damage, or like he like pushes her and she doesn't like go flying off the car or anything like that.
Well, I mean, he also presumably can moderate his strength, but he's really not trying to kill her so much as him, I think.
That's James Bond, yeah.
Yeah. So, Zach, were you at the Spy Museum party? Richard Kiel was there.
Okay, I probably didn't talk to him then.
No,
I might have been there, but I didn't actually talk to him.
So that was, I think it was the big Sharks and Lasers party at the Spy Museum. And I think if I recall, so me and Carolyn went, and we went to his signing. I actually have some signed autographs from him, and I got to take a photo with him, which is pretty cool. But I remember because Carolyn, I think, had maybe seen one of his films. I think maybe Spy Who Loved Me. And so when she was like, wait, who is that? It's like, I introduced him the same way that Bond introduces her, or talks about Jaws to Holly Goodhead. He's like, his name's Jaws. He kills people.
He has been in other stuff, though, right? He was in EGOT, the Mystery Science Theater episode.
Yeah. So he's been in
other like monster roles, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. They trap him inside the gondola while they're on top of it, and they zip line away.
Yeah, and then they have like a funny, goofy comedy crash.
Yeah.
And then this part, I noticed some product placement, which felt
British
so
Airways.
Modern. The 7-Up.
Oh, right. There's a lot of 7-Up advertising.
There's a lot of 7-Up. There's Marlboro cigarettes appear a couple times. That's it.
And then, Jaws crashes his gondola all the way down the mountain. And this is where we enter Dolly, his love interest.
Okay, guys. I remembered very vividly that she had braces.
Nope. Mandela effect. You are one of the many who
believe that. Is that some other movie?
No. This is just, there's an entire segment of Bond fandom who are convinced that she had braces, and that someone, George Lucas went in and George Lucas did the braces off her teeth.
I bet Spike TV did it. I'll blame them.
No, but she's actually never had braces.
Okay.
They also use the Romeo and Juliet love theme for them.
Okay.
Da, 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 da.
Is that from like a movie? I haven't seen
from
that
the
one.
Romeo and Juliet. I think Must have been the 70s. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They've crash landed, but are now safe. So they think Holly Goodhead kisses Bond for saving her life. And then some medics come out. Like Bond's like, no, I think we're all right, actually. But these guys are goons, employees of Drax, who knock out Bond, capture Holly. While they're in the ambulance, Bond gets a hand free. They have a pretty good fight inside the ambulance.
It was a good one.
I was wondering why they actually handcuffed them to, or like they roped them down to a stretcher which had a gap in the middle where they could just slip out from.
I didn't notice that.
So, well, I mean, it's funny you mentioned it because, like, when he to Bond and Dr. Goodhead, he pulls like a part of the stretcher out that he uses to hit Bond. So it's that same part that he. So that was just bad planning on their part. They should have handcuffed him to a different part that didn't slide out.
Yeah, these guys just keep screwing up.
Yeah.
But the part where the guy is on the stretcher and falls out, that reminded you of Hudson Hawk. Christian?
Yes, it did.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a good time. We get some more product placement as well.
Oh yeah, this is where the British Airways one is. That's right.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, Bond falls out the back of the ambulance, but Holly is still there. So she is still captured while he gets away, although not quite on purpose.
Okay, so we had a cool fight scene immediately supplanted by something I personally find to be excessively silly, which is
the Magnificent Seven.
Yes, that's right. He's dressed like Clint Eastwood from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for some reason.
Yeah,
and they have the cowboy music. But I do like that he meets up with his like crew again, like Q and all those guys.
Yeah. So he goes to a monastery where Moneypenny's there. Q is in the other courtyard with some bola, so we get some Q lab scenes.
The laser gun that will show up later.
Yeah. I get M's office where we've got a breakdown of the liquid. It's a nerve gas, which apparently has no effect on animals except humans. And no effect on plants either. We get Bond the know-it-all, where he's like, wait, go back to that. That's the chemical formula. That looks like a chemical formula of a plant. Orchidae negra. Somehow he knows this off the top of his head.
I mean, this is very Batman in that part.
Yeah.
Things I found really funny about, especially the monastery and how they're dressed, and Zach, you were mentioning about this as well, was that, they look very... so they don't necessarily look Brazilian. Like, that's not how Brazilian gauchos would actually dress, right? And then the kind of foreshadowing to the part of the Amazon that they go to as well. It doesn't necessarily look like Brazil either, or the Amazon. But then if you look at the credits later, they shot in Guatemala, so that makes total sense that they, they're dressed the way they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you also like when the credits said it was filmed in outer space? Did you guys notice that?
That is true.
It is true.
Oh man,
it's like the what was it? The Stanley Kubrick. He was such a precise director that he decided to fake the moon landing actually on location. So that's exactly what I was thinking.
There we go.
But yes, so the specific orchid was thought to be extinct, but actually was found in a certain place. And so Bond needs to go to that place where it was discovered. And so, to do that, he takes the Q-boat, which is currently in the Spy Museum in their Bond in Motion exhibit. Zach, this is the boat that we have a photo of in front of with Dexter.
Very nice. Yeah, the Q-boat was great. This chase scene was cool. It's got tons of gadgets. When he blows up the boats, you see bodies flying.
Oh yeah, you see people flying off those things.
That was pretty wild.
We also get the return of not the James Bond theme, but the 007 theme, which Zach, you may remember, featured pretty prominently in From Russia with Love. The sort of like circusy music.
Yeah, well, actually, speaking of From Russia with Love, this part felt like a video game where he keeps blowing them up and more guys keep showing up and he keeps killing them too.
Also, we get Jaws here. Badly, I don't think it's green screen. I think it's got to be a rear projection still by this point.
Yeah, goofy Jaws again.
Yeah. And then we get the pretty cool scene where Bond, sees Jaws. All right, well, we're going to do this, so I'm going to go over Iguazu Falls, except, my boat has a hang glider in it. Jaws does not. So Jaws goes over the falls, and Bond crashes the hang glider in the forest, where he spots a beautiful woman near a waterfall.
Yeah, they don't make them like they used to. Just babes everywhere.
Yeah, he follows her into a ziggurat where there are more beautiful women.
So this part was great. The part where he gets launched into the water, I think, is kind of silly. It's very James Bond. He had to stand exactly on the right spot.
Well, what
to get
I
launched.
liked here, though, is that there's one of the there's like a bridge, and one of the girls is like enticing him. Here, come over this bridge, and he's like, I'm not going to because I know what's going to happen once I cross that bridge. So he's trying to avoid it, but he ends up in a different spot where the same thing that probably would have happened happens.
Yeah. So the part where he's fighting the python and the girls are just looking at him with like creepy smiles.
Yeah.
I found that to be very unsettling, and in a good way though. It's like a horror movie.
Yeah. And then so he kills that python with the poison pen from Holly Goodhead. So I said one of those would come back.
Yeah.
So Jaws is there when pulling him out of the pool. Drax reveals his entire plan. The orchid causes sterility. And we get he brings Bond into his command center where we get some fairly accurate radio chat. I was like, this is where I went through the countdown. They said they were T-minus 2 minutes. And I was like, all right, let me go through this checklist. Here we go. This one starts at about T-minus 5 hours. I went over to T-minus 2 minutes. Like, timing's not quite right, and I'll go into depth in our fact versus spy fiction over what was right, what was wrong. But it's like, it's fairly accurate. This is where we get the answer of why he stole the shuttle.
Oh, really? And what is that?
It's that one of his shuttles developed a fault, and it was faster to just steal a shuttle than to repair it.
Okay.
Yeah. Drax has now done his monologue speech and now about what his whole plan is. So now he's going to kill Bond by leaving him alone in a room with no guards and
easily escapable death trap. I did kind of remember this part, but I like the gadget watch that he uses to blow the vent. So, and then they barely escape. Yes.
The conference room that is also apparently where the exhaust goes to from the shuttles. What did that look like to you?
Well, it looked like Star Wars again.
It looked like Grand Moff Tarkin's conference room.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I was wondering why the computers were there as well. Right? They melt every single time you launch a shuttle, so you gotta rebuild it again.
Yeah.
I liked it. Was a good escape, and then they go into these huge caverns.
Well, yeah,
this movie had pretty good production.
Air vent, yeah.
And, the air vent first, and then the big caverns.
Yeah.
So
wait,
the movie...
there's which is one thing that I think we've talked about before, that we don't see Bond running through air vents. But here's another case where we do. Like, it's once in Dr. No, and then once here. But he doesn't really do it that often.
Yeah, that's like the commando crawl.
Yeah.
Like they make fun of it in the Boondock Saints.
Yeah. That's more Mission Impossible than, I think, James Bond. But yeah, so Holly and Bond manage to sneak aboard one of the other shuttles. They get into their yellow flight suits. It's all a prearranged flight program, so they don't really have to press too many buttons.
That's great.
Just the whole launch area with a huge concern right here. I mean, you typically when you launch, right, there's a lot of water that's being sprayed at your at the thrusters, at the space shuttle main engines for acoustic suppression, to make sure there's like sparks that are being sprayed there to make sure that you've actually combusted all your fuel as well, right? And it's just, I feel like they must have had, it would have ended up killing every single person within that complex to actually launch a shuttle the way they did in that particular facility. So they have to replace the people again, with the next launch as well.
Then I had this in my spy fact versus spy fiction. I looked up the minimum, like the safe distance from a shuttle launch is like 7 miles or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So even
there you go.
If Bond and Holly got through those tunnels super quick, they'd still be dead.
Well, yeah, it's the only way to be sure. Yeah, they get into space, and even I noticed the scientific inaccuracy when the big orange fuel tank.
Yeah.
When they discharge it, it just falls directly down.
Well,
right to the bottom of the frame.
Con, correct me if I'm wrong. They jettisoned those really late.
Yes. Like way after
they're in orbit when they jettison those. Where you are like,
the solid rocket boosters. Yeah, it's not that far past the jettison of the solid rocket boosters that you would then jettison the the fuel tank,
General
right?
tank.
But
Yeah.
that's just yeah.
So I saw them, I was like, that is super late. There's something wrong there.
Yeah. So James Bond makes a reference to the Bible. I didn't realize he was so religious.
They noticed that because they look at their cargo bay, and it turns out that they are what they're ferrying is couples.
It's like Fallout Shelter.
Yeah. So.
Which is not actually a pressurized cargo bay. So
no, it's not, and nor is it heat shielded.
Nor is it heat shielded or anything. So
oh wow, I didn't know
that. They'd be burning or freezing there. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
So at Space Camp, well, I've gone twice, and when you do it's called Advanced Space Academy, which is the one you do when you're in high school. You have multiple, they call them regular duration missions, were about 1 hour each, and you have your extended duration mission. And those are the missions where basically you'll learn how to do all the systems. You get to rotate around and figure out for your extended duration mission, which is 6 hours long, which position you might fit best at. And for the first year I went, and so the instructors will also throw all sorts of errors and alarms at you, and you have to figure out you got to go through your manual and figure out how do you turn off that alarm, change that alarm. We we forgot to, or I think, retract the Canada arm, so our cargo bay doors were open when we landed, which would have killed us.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
So I was like, if opening the cargo bay doors would have killed us then there's no way that anyone could also just survive in the cargo bay. On my second time at Space Camp, we survived our extended duration mission.
Very nice.
I told that story. I was like, all right, make sure we retract the arm. Retract or jettison, one of the two. We just need to make sure it's not sticking out. So they notice a space station.
Yeah, and I like how the space station is invisible to radar, which explains it's like gigantic. It's like enormous. Like, how could you have done this?
I actually found it hilarious that they said, "Oh, it's radar jamming," so that's why they haven't been able to detect us. Which, how radar jamming works is that you actually would broadcast a signal, right, to be able to jam any other radar signals. So it would just immediately alert anybody to the fact that it's trying to do radar jamming. And the other thing that I found really funny is something this large, you would actually just be able to see with the naked eye. Like it's probably at least as large as the International Space Station, right? And you can just see that going overhead.
But the thing is, especially that time, like you could see the space station from with the naked eye. But if you're not looking for it, it's just gonna be, oh, that's a satellite or something. You're really not gonna. It's not, because I've spotted this ISS a couple times, but only because I was specifically looking for it. It's not like if I had not known, it's like, oh, that's weird. That's that. That one star is moving and is also not blinking.
Yeah. I mean, people look out the window with telescopes too.
Yeah. But also this time, Cold War is still going on, so you might assume it's a Russian satellite or something like that if you see it with the naked eye. A giant one with, like in, what was that movie? Space Cowboys. They start to rotate the space station to enable the artificial gravity. Khan, you want to take this?
Sure. So there are a lot of things that I had problems with here. One, I mean, the fact that, right, where they're positioned, or where I assumed that they were standing in the space station, that's not actually where the artificial gravity would be based on the rotation of the space station. So, I mean, if you imagine a wagon wheel, it would actually be kind of on the inner rim of the wagon wheel, where you would actually be able to stand and get some artificial gravity.
I believe they show a fairly accurate version of it, like in Interstellar, like how it would work when you would have artificial gravity around the edges, basically. Yeah,
exactly. And the other thing I actually found hilarious was that so pretty much artificial gravity worked anywhere you were in the space station, right? Whereas, I mean, you would actually start losing it as soon as you started getting to the hub of that space station. Yeah. So it's you're only generating gravity because it's counter to the direction of your centripetal acceleration, right? But they just managed to have gravity everywhere, going through the tubes, going into the kind of the hub area. So I found that kind of funny, but also kind of surprising that But
yeah, I mean,
that's
they
actually
they
how
at
it
least
works.
had that concept
Yeah.
in place, even if they didn't get the science of it quite right. Like, rather than just having a button that says, "All right, now we're turning on artificial gravity."
Right.
But yeah, so aboard the space station, Holly and Bond are trying to blend in. Drax makes his big speech. It's basically going to be a eugenics program that, they're going to destroy everything below, and, your children or your children's children will go back down to reclaim the Earth. Holly and Bond go to knock out the tractor beam. I mean, the radar jamming.
There you go. Nice.
So Holly and Bond knock out the workers and remove a vital component so that they can now be spotted from Earth.
Yeah, there's a part where Holly says, "Let's try this way." I'm like, "Wow, great plan." Really know what they're doing.
So General Gogol of the KGB gets a call from NASA. They confirm that this is not the Russians, who have been surprisingly silent on all of this.
Mm-hmm.
That they're visible on radar. The Americans are sending up a shuttle.
A shuttle loaded with space commandos,
Space
apparently.
Marines.
Yeah, that was interesting.
So Drax starts launching the globes with orchids and toxin vials. Jaws finds Bond and Holly. Bond tries to fight Jaws and kicks him in the crotch, where we get a clang sound.
Well, clearly he's well armored.
But they get captured, and Drax detects the launch and has discovered that the radar jamming has been disabled, so launches 3 globes. We found out that there are 50 globes total that will launch their nerve gases over populated areas all over the world. Drax is going to attempt to destroy the American shuttle with a laser gun that he has in place.
Yep.
Bond and Holly are supposed to be put into an airlock, but Bond managed to convince Jaws to help them because he and Dolly won't fit into Drax's master race plan.
That's
and
right.
Bond activates the emergency stop to prevent the laser from getting the shuttle. And so now here we get the big giant 0G scene.
I thought it looked really good.
Parts of this look really good. Other parts look not as good. The parts where, like, this is apparently the largest amount of people on wires, at least to that point. So they had all the wirework stuff was really good, looked really good. It's when Drax and I think Bond and Holly are on the ground pretending to be moving in slow motion, but still with their feet on the ground. Right. It looks bad.
I kind of liked that. That was
I think the wirework looked really good, but them just moving in slow motion is like, that's not exactly how you would move in 0G.
It's like if you put on a theater show and you're trying to move across the stage simulating spacewalking. That's how I felt. It's just like slower walking and holding on to more things, but still you could very much tell that they were walking.
Yeah. Drax's men go out with jetpacks into space, and the Space Marines go to fight them using similar packs.
I didn't see it on the subtitles, but I'm pretty sure I heard Red Leader and Cold Leader. Did you?
I did not, but let me...
I felt like I heard it, yes.
I believe
I love that they have the laser bolts that they kind of do in Star Wars, though. It's like, it's not a continuous laser. It just actually shoots out like little bolts.
That's right, like a laser bullet, yeah.
The script pulled up here. I don't see anything. No, they don't say anything about Red Leader and Gold Leader.
Okay. It's like on the radio chatter. Yeah.
Seemingly not in the script, but it is entirely possible that they said that, obviously, there's your Star Wars reference. Americans dock their shuttle with the space station and start to take over the station. Bond, Holly, and Jaws are assisting. Bond goes after Drax and is chasing him down a long corridor. But Drax gets a laser pistol from a downed goon. And before he shoots Bond hits Drax with a wrist dart and then puts him out the airlock.
So I only noticed in this part, I think Drax dresses like Dr. Evil here. Again,
he's been dressing like that the entire. That's the standard,
That's what I noticed.
Yeah,
villain attire.
Yeah,
it's like he gets it from the same place he gets his henchmen. I suppose.
Yeah. The station is starting to break up, which will render all of the globes that are there inert when they burn up in the atmosphere. But they still have the 3 that launched.
Do you guys feel like they escalated the tension well enough at this part? I feel like the climax of the movie is when they escape the station.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, one more thing.
Right. Yeah, I think they didn't need that last bit, but there's a big reason why. And it begins with star and ends with wars.
There you go. It is like that. But you know what they needed, like in Star Wars, was a ticking clock.
Yeah. Well, they kind of do.
Well, they did it at the end, but they needed it the whole time.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. That would have been really exciting.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. But yeah, so I like here that, back up a little. So all the Marines get back to their shuttle. Drax's shuttle, Moonraker 5, has a laser on it, so Bond and Holly are going to use that to take out the globes. But their docking release is jammed, and we find that Dolly and Jaws are still aboard. They find a bottle of champagne. They have a toast. Jaws says his only line, "Here's to us."
I didn't like that. I would have preferred he not talk at all.
Yeah.
Personally.
But so Bond and Holly are there. Where are the rest of, the couples? Are they all dead?
No, I assume they escaped.
Where?
We
don't see any other shuttle take off.
Well, just because we don't see him, we have to save money, but he had a ton of shuttles. Makes sense to me.
Okay. Bond asks Jaws to disengage the docking release. Jaws and Dolly are sort of escape in the remains of a pod, and which is not heat shielded. And I'm like, Bond is very, they'll make it. It's only 100 miles to Earth. Like,
I thought it was part of the space station that they actually.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah, so I was like, it's not.
Is that like a joke?
Yeah, and the rest of the station blows up. We hear later that the Space Marines picked them up. Like, okay, fine, that's acceptable. But still, it's like, really, Bond, Jaws just helped you out, and you're just gonna let him go, even though and Holly, or Dolly. That's confusing. Holly and Dolly. Dolly, who's, mostly an innocent. Yes, she did come up there somehow, but, she doesn't have any real role in this. It bothered me for the longest time. How did they actually escape? Now I realize that, later on they mentioned that, they picked them up. And it didn't occur to me that, as in Space Marines docked with that docking segment and then got them out. Okay, that makes sense. Anyways, so... The rest of the station. Go ahead, Con.
So the explosions in space always get me. Yeah, I know that the way it blew up, it was almost reminiscent of the Death Star. So I see like the explosions of this era of filmmaking kind of being similar in space, but still, if you exploded in space, the only reason you would actually have a propagating fireball is because of atmospheric pressure, right? That's the only reason why, on Earth, fireballs look the way they do. So an actual explosion in space would just be a bunch of light and then nothing after it. And it would be a really, really quick flash of light.
And of course, no sound.
Of course, no sound. So it's just always bugged me that these are the explosions that we see in space.
Yeah. Bond and Holly in Moonraker 5. They've got the laser on automatic, so it just needs to cross into the targeting reticule. So they take out one. It's starting to heat up because they're skipping on the Earth's atmosphere to get to where the second pod is. They take out the second one. And the last one, Luke, you've turned off your targeting computer.
Great shot, James. That was 1 in a million. I did like it.
Literally in my notes. Great shot, kid. That was 1 in a million.
But yeah, I like how the shuttle starts to break up. And then Holly's like trying to stay calm, but you can tell she's scared.
Yeah,
that was good too.
What was with that joystick, Con? For the joystick that Holly's using is like, that's not what the shuttle had. It was a weird ergonomic joystick.
Yes. Well, so I love that, and I imagine that was try to set the angle of attack for the shuttle, right? But also, the fact that they were going into the atmosphere pretty much nose first. That killed me. So I used to be a thermal engineer, and that just kills me as a thermal engineer because the shuttle was pitched up a certain way so that most of the heat would be absorbed by the heat tiles
as you
at the
can
bottom,
see on
exactly. So if you go nose first, it's
great for a visual for an audio podcast.
Exactly,
me holding up a model.
So funny enough, I did not feel the same tension about the little vials that are that are going into the atmosphere. That was also because I was like, oh, it's, it would not survive atmospheric reentry. They're fine.
No, that's made out of those special glass.
Oh,
so it's fine.
Yes, that's very true.
We get Houston calling Dr. Goodhead. NASA patches directly to Buckingham Palace and the White House, and they finally get a visual of Bond and Holly post-coitus in the cargo bay. Am I gonna ruin someone's line with Q's line here?
You better not.
And I did get a laugh at it, and we'll talk to it when we get to favorite quotes. But
you delivered it so well too.
Yeah. And with that, our movie ends. All right, spy fact versus spy fiction. Zach, do you have anything?
Yeah, I know you guys have a lot, so I just wanted to briefly mention when they're giving the briefing talking about the missing orbiter, they have a screen that says most secret on it. All right. So classified information on Wikipedia, it says prior to 1942, the UK and other members of the British Empire used most secret, but this was later changed to match the US category name of top secret in order to simplify Allied interoperability. And for those of you who don't already know, top secret is the highest level of classified information. It's further compartmented. So after that, use a code word. That's how you hide more specific, higher level things. Unlike in the movies where it's like it's 10 levels above top secret. That's not true. In order to be given the designation of top secret, it says such material would cause exceptionally grave damage to national security if made publicly available. So that's all I got.
Con, do you have anything that we haven't covered yet?
I think we've covered almost everything. The thing that bugged me the most, of course, was just putting things back in the safe without taking note of the order. So, that was. But other than that, I didn't have. I think we've covered everything else.
All right. So I did quite a bit of research for this movie. At least the title of the movie comes from the Ian Fleming book Moonraker, which I read recently.
All right.
Now, there's only a few things that were actually taken from the book, one of which being the villain's name, Hugo Drax, and a rocket called Moonraker. In this case, it was actually a defensive rocket, not a spacecraft. And also the scene where Bond and a Bond girl are trapped in the air vents of a rocket about to launch is from this.
Oh.
But actually, the plot of the novel Moonraker actually was partially adapted for Die Another Day. In that you have someone who changes their appearance, becomes a multimillionaire, and and has this defensive system that is supposed to protect the world, but is actually gonna not. So there was also a novelization of this film called James Bond and Moonraker, which is written by the screenwriter of the movie, Christopher Wood, because it's so different than the James Bond novel. They was like, all right, we can put out a novelization of it. The Christopher Wood also did one for Spy Who Loved Me, which in a similar case takes very little from the novel. It's interesting because rather than just being a straight up novelization, Christopher Wood decided he's going to put Ian Fleming's James Bond character, like the actual from the novels, rather than just being like a Roger Moore kind of Bond, it is like Ian Fleming's Bond with all the vices and the smoking, 60 cigarettes a day and all that sort of stuff into the Moonraker adventure. Interesting differences in this. There's no Jaws in the pre-titles when he jumps out of the plane without a parachute. Pilot is instead named Trudy. She's much more of a California girl rather than a French actress. Drax's description matches his appearance in the novel, in which he has red hair and facial scarring. There's no Dolly whatsoever, so Jaws doesn't have a love interest. Also, one of the things I did find interesting was they had an explanation for why they're all walking on the space station. They have Velcro on their shoes, is what they say.
And Velcro everywhere on the station.
Yeah, and everywhere on the floor. Which so there have been obviously multiple space stations. Earliest being Skylab. And their solution for how to stay standing upright is that they had so the grating everywhere was like triangle shaped, and they had special shoes that had like a triangle insert. So if you put your foot down and twist, you just stay in that spot.
It's kind of like magnetic boots.
Kind of, except a little less. Well, you don't have to worry about magnetization of everything else.
Mhm.
We already talked about the Dolly braces Mandela effect. And so it has been proven. If you look it up, go down some rabbit holes on the internet, you can see that there's proof that she never had braces.
Okay.
Moonraker, appearances of things from Moonraker in other media. So the Moonraker laser rifle has appeared in the original GoldenEye for the N64 video game, GoldenEye Reloaded, 007 Legends, and the mobile game Cypher 007, which had recently come out. So we may have talked about this another. Actually, I don't know if you have. So there was no, we did talk about when we did our For Mushroom Love video game episode, but there was a video game that came out around the time of Skyfall in time for the 50th anniversary called 007 Legends, which featured Daniel Craig's Bond being put into other James Bond adventures from other actors like Goldfinger, Die Another Day. But so one from each actor. So the one they did for Roger Moore was putting Daniel Craig into Moonraker. And this was a whole level based on that. They actually had Michael Lonsdale come back to voice the role of Drax. I was going to play this level as part of my research. When I reinstalled the game, apparently my save files were all gone. And it is the last level of the game, so I would have had to play through the entire game, and I didn't want to do that in one night. So instead, I watched YouTube run-throughs of it. One of the things I did find interesting that to update it for the current day in MI6. Thinks Drax stole NASA technology for space tourism, because that's what he was doing with it. Rather than just being the builder of a bunch of shuttles, he was actually running his own space tourism. There's a reason for a billionaire to have all these space shuttles.
Well, that's prescient.
Yeah, right? This is in 2012, so there was a bit of that going on, but not like now. And like one of the things they do, he notices that it's basically the last 30 minutes of the movie. And, so he meets up with Holly Goodhead. They notice that, Drax is storing enough food for years, even though they're supposed to be like 30-minute flights. Also, someone's built a nursery because they're going to have babies in space, and that makes them very curious. They add a lot more shooting in this. Weirdly, also, they make a change to this Moonraker shuttle. It has two tail fins, which kind of looks like, didn't the ones from Armageddon have two tail fins?
I think so.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, that's a weird choice. There's no Dolly in this game. Apparently, people who adapt to Moonraker just don't like Dolly, so they leave her out. Also, Bond helps out the Space Marines in the Big Zero-G battle. And rather than destroying the pods with a laser, he actually destroys them inside. There's the big hangar section of the space station, and destroys them with a hand laser as he's going around, and he's like floating around in zero-G. But yeah, so as I've kind of alluded to, Bond or the Drax, as being a billionaire obsessed with space travel and running his own space, travel program, it really brings to mind Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Richard Branson doing much the same now, presumably without the eugenics.
Presumably.
Yeah, and then character of Jaws appears in this film for the second time, the first time being Spy Who Loved Me. He was also later seen in video games, the video games James Bond The Duel from 1993, Everything for Nothing in 2004, and 007 Legends 2012, as well as appearing in the show James Bond Jr. He was, I believe, in the episode that we covered, wasn't he? Zach?
No, wait. I don't think so.
He was. He looked really weird and different, though.
Oh,
looked more like
that's
a
right.
1930s mobster.
No, yeah, he looked like a Captain Planet villain.
Yeah,
I remember.
Yeah. Here's where we get to the fun stuff for me and Khan. More space travel accuracy. So, I looked it up, and apparently, Columbia was actually originally scheduled to lift off in late 1979, so this would have timed in perfectly. But it was delayed with launch. The launch date was delayed by problems with both the RS-25 engine and the thermal protection system, or TPS. So they must have had some TPS reports about that. Sorry, I had Office Space joke. So the part about 3G is a takeoff, that is accurate.
Mm.
So the radio chatter. So when they were doing the launch sequence, like I said, I went through my all sequence. So they said, here's what I found accurate and inaccurate. And they say they started T-2 for all things going on. Really should be around T-7 for when they retract the arm. The APUs, or auxiliary power units, should come on before the hydraulics, which they had reversed. And then the pressurizing the helium tanks is before the arm retraction as well. I was like, but other than that, I was like, they got most of the things they said. There was a few. I think it was like, there was one thing where I was like, I don't recognize that acronym. I couldn't find anything about that acronym, so that one's made up. But everything else was pretty accurate. And then, even if a launch is prearranged, there's still a lot of checklists that the pilot would need to follow. Like so that no, we already talked about the SRB and ET jettison way too late, and the passengers in the cargo bay. Space stations, like, I guess we talked about Skylab. One of the things I did find interesting in my research is that, like, what is it? There, Werner von Braun went on like the Disney Channel, or Disney, like Walt Disney's show, to talk about space stations and propose that the spoken wheel model. And I believe the model that he had brought out in that Disney show is, or at least it was, before they did their refurbishment in the Air and Space Museum on the Mall. Now, one thing that bugged me about the docking sequences with the shuttle is that they dock on the side where there's a crew hatch on the side here, where they
emergency escape.
Yeah. Rather than through the cargo bay. So, the cargo bay doors open, and that's how you would traditionally dock with the space shuttle. But of course, they can't do it that way, because then all of their passengers would be flying out into space because they're all in the cargo bay. Now, here's one thing that I was like, I was impressed by. So, when the Americans launched their shuttle with the Space Marines, Drax's men say it's a Vandenberg launch. This is a launch from Vandenberg AFB Space Launch, probably Space Launch Complex 4 in Santa Barbara, which is currently used by SpaceX. So there we go, bringing prescient, use there again. I liked when they did the emergency stop. You actually see some thrusters firing to actually stop it. It's not just, I'm turning off the engine so we're stopped, because inertia exists.
I like how they were like suddenly flying through as it went to the emergency stop.
Yeah. And then, so the jetpacks that they are using are similar to the MMUs, or man maneuvering units, that were used by a couple, I think 3 shuttle launches in 1984. They were never using it after that, but they had a smaller successor called the Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue, or SAFER, which was supposed to be used for emergencies only. Lastly, the one thing that bugged me is that, especially in that last scene where Holly says, "Fly me around the world one last time," the orbiter is showing flying, belly towards the Earth, tail up, which is not how traditionally the shuttle flies. Because they're doing a lot of experiments and usually observing Earth, they usually fly tail down towards Earth. So I was like, it bothered me. Even though it's not a big thing, it bothered me that it was going around that way. So that's all of the sort of accuracy of the space travel that I was able to find, or the things that, at least as a 2-time Space Camp trainee and Right Stuff Award winner, yes, I'm bringing that up. I think it should be right here. Oh, hey, look, it's my Right Stuff Award.
You might have a better perspective on this. So at the last scene, right, where they're still floating in the cargo bay, and communicating, is that supposed to be after they've re-entered the atmosphere, or did they kind of skip off of the atmosphere and then go back into orbit?
I believe they were skipping off the atmosphere. Yeah, they didn't actually re-enter.
Okay.
Because they are orbiting around again, like the scene that bothered me where they're just flying by.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I believe it's supposed to, because if they were if that was during re-entry,
well, they wouldn't be able to communicate either. Yeah, it's true. And
they would not be in the cargo bay because they'd be dead.
That's very true. The only other thing that, and Sorry, I was looking back into my notes again, and the only thing that I saw that somewhat bothered me was that they have a large antenna on the space station as well that just keeps on rotating constantly, and that's such a trope of these sci-fi movies. But in reality, it wouldn't actually do that. It would be able to track the ground station, right, and just slowly move as it's trying to broadcast data to that ground station, and then go to the next one. And
well, that also depends. Do we know if is the space station geosynchronous or geostationary, or we don't know?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking, if it's probably in low Earth orbit, then it would just it would lock onto a location on the Earth. It would track it through, and then it would lock into the next location. Yep.
One last thing I have is about the Orchidea nigra, the sterilizing orchid. Doesn't exist. I looked it up. I tried to find anything. Seemingly nothing similar. The only chemical that acts similarly is apparently ricin, which is also a poison that I don't know if we've actually have we talked about ricin on this podcast before. I feel like we have, but I cannot recall.
I feel like yes, probably.
But the ricin being the type of poison that was used to kill Georgy Markov with the umbrella gun, a replica of which is featured in the Spy Museum. There's my Spy Museum plug of the podcast. It's the third, I think, I've had. All right. So with that is our spy fact versus spy fiction. I know there was a lot of it, but hey, when we get a NASA scientist on the podcast to talk about Moonraker, I get to nerd out on that side of stuff.
So now it's time for our favorite quotes. Khan, as our guest, would you like to go first?
I had a quote here that I felt like really encompassed all of the things that we were talking about in the movie with very impractical ways to kill people. So Drax at one point says, "You defy my attempts to plan an amusing death for you." And I felt like that encompasses everything.
Pretty good.
Yeah, he owned it, though. He owned that he was not messing around, or was messing around, excuse me.
Yes, no, he completely owned it. And I feel like that quote actually qualifies all of the crazy death scenes or the crazy assassination scenes that were in the movie. The other one, "Any higher, Mr. Bond, and my ears will pop." So this was at the beginning of the movie while he was actually on the plane, before the skydiving scene, and I thought that was just absolutely hilarious.
All right, Zach, what do you got?
So yeah, some of mine were taken. I'm surprised Connie didn't mention that one of the classic lines from this movie is, "Welcome, James Bond, see that some harm comes to him."
Yeah.
Holly and Bond, they say trust out of the question, which I liked. I think my absolute favorite, though, was Bond walks up to Q and he just says, "Balls, Q," like perfectly like deadpan.
Bolas.
No, balls, Q. And then finally, one that I liked because it was so bad. So Bond throws Drax out the airlock, and he looks so happy about it. He's so pleased with himself. And then Holly comes up to him, and he has plenty of time to think of a good line.
Yeah.
Plenty of time. She said, "What happened?" And Bond says, "Oh, he had to fly." I was like, that sucks. That sucks. Come on, James Bond. Yeah, I would have had him say, "Oh, he needed some space." But maybe that wasn't something people said in 1979. Yeah.
But he does have a better line before Holly comes, where he says to Drax, "Allow me, take a giant step for mankind," and pushes him out the airlock.
Yeah, there you go.
When they fall from ziplining, Holly asks Bond, "Have you broken something?" "Only my tail is hot."
Oh, yeah, there you go. Of course he has a tailor.
Of course he does. And I've got two lines from Drax that are just so long and wordy, but so funny. "You have arrived at a propitious moment, coincident with your country's one indisputable contribution to Western civilization. Afternoon tea." And this is when, Drax is waiting for them in the no longer a laboratory as they appear with gas masks. "You must excuse me, gentlemen. Not being English, I sometimes find your sense of humor rather difficult to follow." But that's what I've got for my favorite quotes.
All right, so now it's time for our ratings on a scale of 1 to 10 martinis, 1 being Avengers 1998 level bad, and 10 being even better than No Time to Die or Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. How would we rate Moonraker? Khan, as our guest, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I would actually give it 7 martinis. So
San
I really
Martini.
enjoyed it. I mean, it was silly at times, there was some pretty bad engineering and bad science with it, but overall, it was an extremely entertaining movie. 7 martinis it is for me.
7 martinis.
Okay.
All right. Exactly.
Mm.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, I really don't know what to rate it. I was hoping Khan might be able to help me out. I never really liked Roger Moore. Like I mentioned that. There's silly stuff. There's really good stuff. The space didn't really do much for me. It actually reminded me, until the laser gun battle started, it actually reminded me more of 2001 than Star Wars.
Fair. Yeah.
I can't really say it was that good, especially in comparison to other James Bond movies, but it's not that bad either. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I would say it's slightly above average.
All right.
And the weirdness in it of it being in space was not enough.
Yeah. Kind of alluded to this, or even flat out stated that this is not my favorite Bond movie. Roger Moore is not my favorite Bond, but it is one I enjoy. And I don't think I think I'd watched it before, but I hadn't really watched it specifically through the lens of being not only am I a big spy fan, I'm also a big space travel fan. Obviously, I went to Space Camp twice, so viewing it from that lens now, I think I had more fun this time than any other time I really watched it. It is really the one Bond film where those two passions of mine combined, Bond and space. That we've had cases where, he is in a spacesuit and almost goes up into space. You only live twice. He drives a moon buggy around in diamonds, but he only goes to space in the movies in this one film. He's gone to space in a couple of video games and a comic book, but not only in the movies here. And I really had a fun time with it. I realized as I was preparing for this, for someone who's this is not my favorite Bond film, I have a lot of sort of memorabilia and collectibles around Moonraker. As I have pointed out, I have this little Moonraker shuttle. I have Roger Moore in a spacesuit, Funko Pop. Which this this kind of style, him in this kind of style of spacesuit is all over the marketing. He never actually wears this kind of spacesuit in the film.
Yeah, that is disappointing.
It is worn by the Space Marines, and I think they put it in him for promotional photos. So there are photos of him, but I actually also have this Japanese program for Moonraker. When I may have told the story about how I just got into James Bond while I was in Japan. My host family, finding that out, actually found this and gave this to me, which was really cool. It's got pictures. It's all in Japanese. And then I also created this flight jacket resembling, the Bond's spacesuit, including getting this patch, which is for. So in the movie, if you look at the Space Marines outfits, they do not have NASA on them. They are actually for the the Society for International Space Exploration. Even though they call out NASA in the film. And I did a little research into this because I was like, why is that? Oh, apparently I think if you look up that, you find out that at least the same patch, if not the same spacesuits used in this movie, were also used in Superman 2, which is when Ursa, the bad Kryptonian, rips off the patches and is putting them on her own thing. This is one of the patches she rips off. Anyway, so that being said, as someone who is not, this is not my favorite movie, I have a lot of stuff around it, and I had a really fun time watching it. So I'm gonna say, I have to look back at what I rated other James Bond films. Are there other the ones that I know I love more that I would rate that I rated less? I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10. I think it is a fun ride. It's a fun romp, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Very good. Thanks for that. So, Khan, thank you for joining us here on the Spy-Fi Guys. Do you have anything you want to plug? As podcasters do.
So I don't have anything very specific to plug. I just wanted to thank you both for the opportunity to be on here and to have a really fun time talking about something that I certainly geek out about. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, well, thank you, Con, for joining us on this special Global James Bond Day episode this year. Yeah, it's been a blast. I know we usually nerd out about space stuff, but this specific intersection is just, it's rare for us to get to do this with that kind of thing. So that was a lot of fun.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us here on the Spy-Fi Guys. You can find us on social media at the Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube as well, and our merch store at redbubble.com. Until next time, I'm Zach.
And I'm Christian.
And we are the Spy-Fi Guys, signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Spy-Fi Guys. If you enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The theme song from this podcast is Mistake the Getaway by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Films, books, and television shows reviewed by our podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended.
This is a personal podcast. Any views, statements, or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the participants. They do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the participants may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
You can find our podcast on social media at The Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.